I wouldn't be a musician without people like Pete paving the way. If you are a contemporary musician, whether it's gospel or whatever it is you do, and you can gig, you can play at church, there's no one throwing stones at you, it's the guy you should thank. Send him royalty. Every time you do a gig, the way you have withholding tax, add 72.50 to your bill and send it his way.
That was obviously a problem because that music, as far as the older generation were concerned, is for the disco. And I said, but why?
Right.
The big question in my mind was why? Why is the devil getting all the best music? Because that music was nice. I mean, this is the stuff that we dance to. Putting out these shows and what have you. And, it catches the attention of the world.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're standing side by side by some of the most famous people in the world.
Yeah.
Sharing the same stage as Erica Campbell from Mary Mary. Some of these guys are just incredible people already.
Yeah.
But there I was in Las Vegas with all these guys for the biggest Black Gospel award show.
Yeah.
And having won. You're not just attending.
You've seen your journey, and then you're seeing where things are now. Is there what's the one thing that you think my generation takes for granted?
Just one?
Just one, because this podcast, it's sponsored by Time Limits.
Schizophrenia conversation, essentially speaking.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to Essentially Speaking. We are still on season 3, and today I have a legend. I don't drop that word for everyone. But this is like, I was trying to research on you, and the word that came up was Godfather. Apparently you're the godfather of contemporary gospel music in Kenya. Come on. But I'd even remove the word gospel. I'll just say contemporary music. A lot of things that you have done, we appreciate. Right. You are a one-time Stella Award winner.
Yes.
And fun fact, you're co-founder of Kisima Award.
Correct.
What? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Dr. Pete Odera.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Noel. I appreciate it.
Man, I didn't know you co-founded Kisima Awards. What year was that?
That was I think it's 84.
No.
84.
You're lying.
No, not 84. 1994. 1994. Oh. That is how old we are.
You would have tripped me up.
That is how old we are.
Okay.
Yeah, 1994, in the living room of my father's house, we said we need to do an award. Kenya at that time, there was only what they had was Music Copyright Society of Kenya did an award every year, and basically it said the person who sold most records got most royalties, whatever, from the MCSK at that time. And what we were doing was outside of the gambit, outside even of the purview of Music Copyright Society at the time. It was just so ahead of its time. So we decided, and people jumped on the bandwagon.
Right. I'm going to get into some of that pioneering that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But for the people who may be on this channel,
yes,
and they don't
essentially speaking,
they don't know Pete.
Yeah.
I want to say that I wouldn't be a musician without people like Pete paving the way. If you are a contemporary musician, whether it's gospel or whatever it is you do, and you can gig, you can play at church, there's no one throwing stones at you, it's the guy you should thank. Send him royalty. Every time you do a gig, the way you have withholding tax, add 72.50 to your bill and send it his way. Those are his royalties. Sawa. Pete Odera. I'm glad that you've graced.
Well, I'm glad. That's a huge intro.
No, it's true. It's true. I think I watched an interview once where Eric was saying the same thing. Eric was like, you guys need to bow in the direction of Pete Odera. Like he took all the arrows for y'all. But yeah, we definitely appreciate it. And I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, is so that people who are just, my people are born in 2004. So they don't know. When you're saying 94, it's like, guy.
There were people.
Like,
there were human beings.
What are you saying? But I think to get started, one of I know your early influences, even outside here, we're looking at, posters of like Whitney, some of these Motown chaps.
Right.
I know that you had a rich kind of musical upbringing. At least
Right.
your dad played records and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But in terms of like Kenyan, like for me, when I think about the Kenyan musician I first saw, and I was like, that guy's good, and I think I want to do that. I think for me it was guys like Harikimani,
Right.
Dij.
Wow. People that we were producing.
Yeah, people that clearly are producing. For you, who was that Kenyan act that you're like, these guys are actually good? Like whether before you're a musician, whenever it was in your timeline.
My uncle, Gordon Ominde, had a band.
Okay.
And this band was called Black Savage. And in that band, it had varying different people. But at one point, Ayub Seda was in that band. Gordon Ominde, Baraka Ching. These names these are legends, literally legends. But at one point, he's still alive. Guido Kibukosia was the bass guitarist for that band. So these were the guys who were in my thing. And so my mom went to live with her uncle, who happened to be Professor Ominde happened to be Gordon's dad. So I grew up in that house where there was a piano, guitars, whatever. But this was a university professor with a university professor who lived a pretty comfortable life at the time. He was a professor in geology. And so his kids grew up playing instruments and things. So they formed a band, and the band was called Black Savage. And I just happened to be, it's not something that I planned, not anything. That's where I grew up.
Okay.
So with these guys in my view, that was something that I grew up with. And then, of course, now my dad went to school in the US.
Yeah.
That's another story for another day. That's that airlift whole story.
Okay.
So my dad, during the holidays, would go and work in Chicago. The Chicago clubs had live music. He was a busboy, a waiter.
Yeah.
No, a waiter is glorified. A busboy, basically
Dishes.
clear the dishes.
Yeah.
So he's clearing the dishes. But the guys who were playing on the stage at that time is Dizzy Gillespie, Count Basie. Live. Miles Davis, my dad, every night watched this happen.
Wow.
Every night. So that's the music he came back to Kenya with.
I see.
So my dad, so this is those Kenyans who had been exposed to Western music. My mom had now grown up in this university professor's house, and so they had classical music. And then my dad's relative had a benga band. So this entire milieu, that's the word I'd use. So this fruit salad of influence is what I grew up around.
Right.
So that's what I was exposed to.
Did you just say that Black Savage recorded Kothbiro?
They were the first. That was the first recording of Kothbiro.
So this precedes the Ayub version that we.
Ayub's version is the redone version.
I see.
The one that ended up on the film.
Yeah.
That's a much later version. A much later version.
Look at that.
Yes, there was a 45 RPM thing.
Yeah.
That had those crackles and stuff.
Yeah.
Crackles is not crisps.
No,
It's
I
the
understand
sound.
what you're saying.
The sound. So
Remember Kenyatta Market.
yes. So yeah, you might actually find at Kenyatta Market
The stall.
at the stall.
Okay.
Stall 255. What, I've forgotten the number.
What? Okay,
Yeah.
that's wild. Because
It is.
thinking about how much Kothbiro has been sampled, like Kanye,
Yeah.
like Rick Ross.
Yep.
What?
Yep.
That's madness. That's your uncle.
That's my uncle.
Look at this. I'm sitting with. That's why I say legend. Like,
Yeah.
put some respect on his name,
Yeah,
bro.
so that is the heritage.
Wow. Okay.
So that's one side. There's a side that I never knew. My grandfather was a musician. You know, the Kambanane, the Nyatiti guy. But I never saw him play because we just didn't have that kind of a relationship with him. So genetically, that is what was happening. But then environmentally, this is what I was exposed to. So my mom's side is the one that cultured me. My dad's side gave me the genes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. For those who don't know, before Heart the Band was a thing, there was a band in the 90s.
Original Heart.
The original Heart.
1994.
It was you, Ted Josiah, and who?
So Heart, we formed Heart in 1993. I was the founder of that group. Myself, Ted Josiah, Sally Oyugi, who's now passed on, and Esther Marakinyo. I have pictures. I have X files.
Please, I
I have vault.
want to put them.
I have some from the vault. I will give you pictures.
Okay,
I'll
okay.
give you pictures.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming, I think if we go down that rabbit hole, we'd stay a while.
Yeah.
But I think what's notable talking to you is the backlash that you all got.
Yeah.
Because you're doing urban
Yeah.
contemporary Christian music.
Yeah. The backlash was really, you know, it was not a professional or fashionable thing to be a musician. The musician, so there's many sides, there's many layers of that. Being a musician said basically you failed at everything else. Because at the time, if you remember, after Kenyatta died,
He said, if you remember.
yeah, well, I'm so
don't.
sorry. After
go on, go
Kenyatta
on.
died, when Moi came in, what ended up happening is the arts dove. So if you weren't doing Tawala Kenya, Moi Ju, Nyayo Tu,
Yeah.
something kind of music, art took a place. Now I'm very serious. This is why Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Michere Mugo, many of these thinkers, artists, writers they fled the country because there was no room for artistic expression or literary conversation. So those who had the artistic craft, you just had to find a way to make it work. So the pathway of a musician was not something to be admired because the thinking of the day is that artists aren't worth anything. So that was one layer. The second layer is that there was stricture with regard to what you were able to do as a Christian musician, as a Christian in music.
Yeah.
And that was at the time Mwanza Town Choir, Jericho Town Choir, and any town choir.
Right.
So basically, you had a choir that had robes and sang this music.
So traditional kabisa.
Yeah, so that was it. And the most you'd have is maybe some bongos, possibly a guitar. Possibly a guitar. So electronic music was for clubs.
Right.
So that was the second barrier.
Right.
So you imagine that now here is this bunch of young people. Here I am trying to write songs that would play on. There was a show that came on at 4 p.m. on VOK radio that was Beat Time. Anybody in my age remembers Beat Time, and as soon as I say Beat Time, there's something that happens in their mind. But that is, because you guys have channels, everybody has their own you have your own playlist on Spotify that nobody else does.
Right.
There was no Spotify, so you turned on the radio and this is what you heard. But that music you had your Michael Jackson, you had your later Whitney Houston, you had your just basically anything that was 80s pop, funk, R&B was playing at that time.
Yeah.
So I wanted to write music that would play in that sort of space.
Along the same vein, yeah.
And that was obviously a problem because that music, as far as the older generation were concerned, is for the disco. And I said, but why?
Right.
The big question in my mind was why? Why is the devil getting all the best music? Because that music was nice. I mean, this is the stuff that we dance to. That makes sense. I mean, that would make sense. Anyone listening to this, say, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it didn't make sense at that time to the people who are, here's a big word that has become very common, gatekeepers at the time. Did I just make you twitch or something? Yeah.
Just
So that was a
won't.
big deal. You couldn't bring that music into the church.
Right.
I remember one of my pastors saying, no, Peter, you're bringing the disco into the church. What are you bringing the disco? No. So that was our thinking. So those are the layers.
Right.
So other than it being economically not a viable, this is something that's to be there. These were drug addicts and failures in life, and then you're bringing the disco. This was you're swimming uphill with lead boots on your soles.
Yeah.
That was just a difficult time, but that's not how I saw it.
Right.
This is now, I can explain this how I'm doing now because I say, oh, is that what we were doing? At that point, it seemed like to me, this is the reasonable path to take. This is the reasonable path to take.
Okay. So I guess I know you guys fashion as well. Like,
Oh, man. Okay, so you imagine this is the way you're supposed to be
So it's
dressed.
the robes.
Mwanza,
The robes is-
yes. But you try and picture how hard the band look now and how Sauti Sol look now. That's
Yeah.
the best example.
Yeah.
And then put that right next to the robes in 1993.
Right.
It's so
Tough.
anomalous. It
Tough.
is so anomalous. And then the guys, now both the girls and the guys have dreads and braids and earrings. It was just not it was something that was so out there.
Yeah.
But I remember us making a deliberate decision at one. I don't remember the exact day, but saying that we need to catch the attention of our peers, and our peers are not looking at robes. Our peers are going to be looking out for whoever was,
Boys to Men,
Boys to Men, MC Hammer. This is what these guys are listening to. So let's MC Hammerize our music. Let's do this. And here's the main thing was this.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to pioneer. I wasn't trying to pioneer music.
Right.
I wasn't trying to break barriers. What I was trying to do is reach my generation, because my generation were listening to what I was listening to. I said, okay, this is what I'm listening to, but let me transform this and give you this. So the other thing that we're doing deliberately, this I know we were doing deliberately, was to make our peers and our generation proud about our heritage and identity as Africans. So we were also pioneering to our generation writing songs in our mother tongue, writing songs. So now you'd hear songs like Chunya, Chunya Gombo Neno Nyasai, that kind of thing. We started writing in Swahili. So now we were writing in Kizigua, Swahili, Doluo, Kamba, all these languages that were surrounding us, and then presenting that on stage.
Okay.
So there was a cultural vibe there in terms of finding our identity. There was a fashion vibe. There was all these are piled on top of us. So please remember that we're supposed to wear ties
Yes.
or robes. So these were the many challenges.
Right.
But I wasn't seeing it as a challenge, as I'm not supposed to do this. I said this just seemed to be the natural thing for us to do.
Right. Right. Okay. And then in that era, I think I've heard you speak about the church not being ready for creatives, quote unquote. Like I know Akina Eric started in church.
Yeah.
And then
You mean Eric Wainaina and Five Alive?
Yes.
Yeah. These were people, Five Alive, Eric. I mentored these guys.
Yes.
I was leading the way, and they came to me to say, hey, we want to sing. Eric came to me after one of my concerts, says, man, this is amazing. I'd like to sing. And Eric ended up being BGVs for Peter. That's so hilarious.
Just name dropping casually.
No, but this is I'm not telling.
No,
this
it's
is
the reality.
This is the
It's
reality.
The reality, yeah.
So to me, what ended up happening, really just to go to your point, I feel the being unaware of the cultural and societal impediments, being unaware. It's a thing that young people do. We just push boundaries without knowing we're pushing boundaries.
Yeah.
I think that it was important that I wasn't 55 and really thinking through the implications of what I'm going to do. That 25 years down the line, people will be quoting me or saying that. I wasn't thinking like that.
Yeah.
If I was, I may have been a little more careful about what I said. But because I wasn't that careful, we're here now. We're here. Yeah.
Okay. Shout out to Ted and you said
Sally
Esther.
and Esther. Sally.
And R.I.P. Sarah. So
R.I.P.
When did she pass?
This was, I did that. That was one of the most painful funerals I did.
Yeah.
Maybe 5 years ago, I would think.
Yeah.
I'd have to check. It's one of those painful memories.
Paula to her family. But the memories live on. We are in 2025.
Absolutely.
Talking about
what an
heart.
incredible songwriter.
Yeah, that's crazy. And Pete as solo, when did...
So that's an interesting story. So I was in a church band that led worship in the youth service at Nairobi Baptist Church.
Yeah.
And then I started writing songs. I mean, I'm writing songs that the band, they didn't get.
Yeah.
because these songs sound a little more clubby than they sound modern. Because Nairobi Baptist Church was always the church that was very forward thinking, forward looking. They're the first church to have had a youth service, first church to have electronic equipment for the worship, first church to have drama.
That's crazy.
That is why Nairobi Baptist was so at the cutting edge.
You're talking about like in the 80s.
This is in the late 70s and 80s.
There was no church with like electronic music.
To put that out there, as this was one of the first churches, and we're not even talking about the 80s, we're talking about late 1960s.
Wow.
1969, 1970, early 1970s. So you have they're the first church to have a youth service.
Yeah.
I'm not saying youth in the church, like there's a service
for
specifically for the young people.
Okay.
So that kind of thinking was very different at that time. So there was already a micro culture there that said you can come and grow your talent here. So because of people like now the late Reverend Tom Houston who started this, he just passed on last year. Those are some of the pioneers of that space of now saying let's buy some instruments and let them do this. So that culture, that space allowed us to do that. Yeah. So when we came into that space, it just seemed, like I'm saying, it was the natural thing to do. So there's a band that's doing this music. And I said, but this band that's doing the music for Sunday is great. And you're doing your special song, or you're leading the choruses or whatever it is for church. But this is not where I want to be. This is not where I'm feeling my vibe. I feel that my vibe is outside of the church. But for many people, there was no expression outside of the church.
Right.
What other expression are you looking for? You're going to play in the discos? No. But because in my mind, I saw the power of music to transform society. This was something that I was very aware of. I said, look, here's Michael Jackson. He has all these, Rod Stewart. He has all these big names of music. And we've never met them, but we're singing their songs and they're driving our thinking. Well, why not get big Christian songs and let's do it? So that was the thinking.
Right.
So it already created problems because in order to create that kind of music, you needed their kind of instruments. And so now the church just happened to buy a DX7, Yamaha DX7. How was that DX5? And I think it was Jack Odongo who had a DX7. Some people had a DX7. So that's the sound I want. Yeah. I want that, for the ballads, I want that nice, tingly sound. And then I want the drum machine, the TR series, the Roland TR series that would produce all these breakdance beats that we knew from the 80s. That's what I wanted. And so I had a friend who just happened to have a TR 505. I think it was a TR 505. And then he had an Alpha Juno Roland keyboard. And so some of the hardware was present. And as soon as those things show up on stage, it produces that sound. That sound. Yeah. With the, what's that thing called?
Pitch bend.
Pitch bend and modulation that was in the club.
Yeah. And
the young people perk up and say, do that again. And so you're putting these songs out there with pitch bend and synth sounds that make everybody want to move. They're not sitting still. And of course the drum machine is making the church sound like Cameo. The band Cameo just walked in.
Yeah.
And this is, if I can't listen to some of that music now. I said, this is such a terrible sound. But that's the sound that was so cutting edge back then.
Yeah.
And when we began to put out that music, my co-writing friend at the time was John Menya. He now lives in Philadelphia. John's mother was African American. She's still alive, African American lady. So you can imagine this is stuff from America that comes here that's now sounding like America.
Yeah.
So, we wanted to be Black Americans, you know what I mean? But then now I don't know if you can see it. This is because we take these for granted. You have your Logic and what have you. It has all these inbuilt instruments. All you have to do, you don't even need a keyboard anymore. You can play it off your laptop. this is what we were dealing with. There was a hardware issue, and I was so fortunate to be in the at that space in that time with the history that I've just told you. To be in that space at that time, that now I was the first one. It's the law of first place to produce this kind of sound. It doesn't even have to be great. You just have to be there first.
Right.
And because I was first, notoriety. So suddenly everybody's saying, "Oh, hey, that Odera guy, did you get his album? Somebody reminded me, I think it was last week, a lady walked up to me and says, I still have the first tape. And I was kind of like, please don't play it for me.
Yeah.
But that's the stuff that now made that thing, that somebody was daring. And I think that was the thing, to be willing and daring to just put it out there.
Yeah.
There were certainly more qualified musicians than me.
Okay.
For sure. People who had great musical pedigree. So that's the environment that this stuff was coming out of.
Right.
So really just out of curiosity, I think if I was a young person, I would say, that is odd. Let me go to that church. What are you doing? So if you hear club music, I mean now, you can't, sometimes you can't even make the distinction
lines are
between
blurred.
what is Christian music, what's club music. You can't really tell. But at that time, it was very clear, very clear. But now you hear this synth music and whatever, and you're passing outside. You look, you say, "Wow, that sound is amazing." So that's the context. That's the context.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess you alluded to this. You said you weren't trying to pioneer anything. You were being your authentic self.
Accidental hero.
And you just happen to sometimes be the first guy to do some of these things.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about pioneering a little bit.
Sure.
You are probably, I'm going to make some assumptions here and then just tell me if yes or no. Quick fire.
Yes.
You're probably the first artist to play like major festivals as the only Christian on the bill.
Absolutely.
You're probably the first Christian artist to like do live band and have dancers,
Yeah.
etc. Probably first Christian artist to have an original set in places like Kani,
Yeah.
etc. You get the point.
Yeah.
So when I say pioneering, like people like me, I don't think would be able to do what I do if you didn't take those shots. So thank you, man.
You're welcome.
Pay my rent, man, every day. Appreciate you. But talk about pioneering. I think one of the things when I think about pioneering, is that sometimes when you're the first one to do things, that it's people like me who are seated here who benefit. Like many years later. So talk about the duality of trying to be authentic self, but in a way knowing that you might not eat the fruit immediately.
I don't know about that. Not knowing that you'll eat the fruit immediately.
You might not know.
I think I remember having this conversation. Ted leading this conversation about, no, we're not going to do other people's music. But we're saying, no, from now we're only doing our music. And so we got that kind of inspiration and said, I'm not doing covers. And there's a season where I said, no, we're not doing covers. We're just going to do our own music. And I think that discipline made us write the kind of songs that we did. And writing our own music gave us control.
Right.
And so you're not comparing us with somebody else. I feel if I didn't do it, it wouldn't have been a stretch to say it would not have taken another 2 to 5 years before somebody else did it. Somebody had to do it.
It was inevitable.
There was an inevitability to what was going on. I wasn't actively trying to pioneer. What was happening is that I just happened to be riding a wave where I was like now being carried by something that was bigger than me.
Right.
So of course that had implications. I promise you, Noel, it's people who came afterwards saying, we treated you badly. And I was like, oh, did you? Oh, yeah, we rejected you. I said, oh, because that was not my posture.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, TBH, I actually thought that what I was going through was what happens to every Christian.
It's normal.
This is normal because, you read the Bible, it says, if you love me, you'll be persecuted.
Yeah.
I said, oh, this is just normal. I didn't know it wasn't normal. I didn't know this was not a normal walk. I didn't know that this is trauma. I didn't know that I'm walking through a trauma minefield. I was just that. When I say Forrest Gump, I was just completely oblivious of what was going on. I felt, this is what I know, I felt that just give me an opportunity to talk to Elder so-and-so. I'll explain it to him and he'll be fine with it.
Yeah.
And the truth is, Elder so-and-so was never fine with it.
Right.
Or Mr. So-and-so, or head of KBC at the time, or, whatever radio station, well, KBC, just one radio station. If you let me, I was always with that mindset that if they hear us, if they understand us,
Hear
they
our
won't,
heart.
if they hear our heart, they won't hate us. And, Ted was a little more pragmatic about it and said, Ted and Esther were a little more rooted in reality than myself and Sally. Ted was like, in fact, Esther told me one day, you don't have to explain to these guys. They don't understand. This is not our audience. And so they had a real understanding. I think Ted and Esther had a better understanding of who our audience was. I wanted to onboard everybody. I would like the old people to join us and clap. Our young people are doing something creative. I'd like the young people to do that, but I just didn't fully understand. I didn't fully understand that this is what it meant to pioneer. You're going to have to forget some things and leave out some people. When the penny finally dropped, I sort of gritted my teeth and said, I'm sorry for the people who don't understand. And by the time that was coming, Kirk Franklin now hit the scene. And then I didn't have to explain anymore.
Right.
He was Kirk Franklin. For those of you who think that gospel music has gone too far. And then suddenly it's number one on the radio stations. You heard, and that wasn't the first number one gospel song at that time.
Yeah.
The Reason Why We Sing was huge. And that's a ballad, a worship ballad, if you like. And this was number one on all charts. And that was like abnormal. But in the same way that Kirk Franklin just happened to be picked, this is not something, he was just a victim of circumstances.
Yeah.
He just happened to be there at the time. And if it wasn't him, then it was Hezekiah Walker. It wasn't Hezekiah Walker, it was somebody else who was going to meet that thing. And so this is what began to happen as a global phenomenon. This story can be repeated in Australia, in India, wherever there was this cultural construct that was similar to what we had here in Kenya. That same thing happened. You have this in Zambia. I know it happened in Uganda because I know Limit X and the people in Uganda who this happened to. A similar story in Zambia. So the thing is, wherever there was this cultural construct, whether this former colonies that had this cultural construct, this thing was happening. So that's how I see it. So was pioneering terrible? Yeah, it sucked because to be paid as a musician was just enough of a hard concept. We're paying you for music. Why? That's, you're no good. So
is this both church and outside?
Exactly.
Okay.
But especially in the church, because now, why should we pay for the gospel? This is the thinking. Why should we pay for the gospel? So already you have bad rap as a musician, then now gospel musician. That's terrible. So it was quite terrible. I remember the Hard Rock Cafe in Nairobi. We did a gig for the Hard Rock Cafe. So
there was a Hard Rock Cafe.
There was a Hard Rock Cafe in Nairobi and Mombasa. So Hard Rock Cafe in Nairobi was upstairs at the Barclays Plaza. Downstairs was the Fern Restaurant. The Fern Restaurant was co-owned by a lady called Grace Nganga. She owned this. A Christian lady said, "Come and play at my restaurant," and that became the place where Heart was now domiciled. Every Sunday afternoon, we'd come and play. So what I didn't understand was how important that specific point was in the change of what Heart would become, the juggernaut that it would become. Young people, it was free. Young people would come and there'd be hundreds, possibly thousands of young people in this tiny restaurant space that was just overflowing. The Hard Rock Cafe had just opened. It was barely getting anyone. So Hard Rock Cafe has a liquor license, has everything, but nobody's coming there. So they're looking to, this is our audience downstairs.
Yeah.
So they said, why don't you come and play at at the Hard Rock Cafe. So we went to the Hard Rock Cafe and did the Christmas New Year thing. And I remember they paid us 17,000 shillings for for playing Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and New Year's Eve. They paid us 17,000.
That was a lot of money back in the day, I bet.
We fought for those 17,000s. I mean, come tomorrow. You see this come tomorrow? Come tomorrow, come tomorrow, come tomorrow, come tomorrow.
The
For a
accountant
month.
is on leave.
The accountant was permanently on leave.
Just
Or the
one
checks are in
signatory.
Mombasa.
One signature.
The checks have gone to Mombasa, they'll come back. In February, we were still there. And the manager came and said, I've seen you guys here so often. Is there a problem? I said, yes. You remember this gig we did in December? We haven't been paid.
Wow.
And he said, what? Come in the afternoon. We come in the afternoon and give us our check. You take the check because now you have to open a bank account. Anyway, so these are Masaibu, yeah, Wasani.
Yeah. End of last year, we did a gig together.
Yeah.
Or rather, we were both on the bill.
Yeah.
And backstage, we were having some interesting discussions. And one of them, I think you were alluding to paying the cost.
Yeah.
The folly of us youth. We don't know the things you have endured.
I sound like an old man.
And rightly so. When I hear you talk, I'm just like, what am I complaining about? Because I complain about a lot.
Yeah.
Looking back, you've seen your journey, and then you're seeing where things are now. Is there? What's the one thing that you think my generation takes for granted that from what you've seen?
Just one?
Just one, because this podcast, it's sponsored by Time Limits.
I don't know. I don't know if I can say. There's many things we take for granted that we'd have an audience. There was a time when there was no audience. I remember going to McCann Erickson, going to GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, going to Pepsi. These are some of the, these are advertising agencies and the big spenders at that time to look for sponsorship. And writing the proposal and saying, we're doing a gig, there'll be gospel music played, and they'd laugh. I remember the marketing manager for Pepsi, Caucasian dude, who just looked at me and said, what can you possibly know that the marketing manager of Pepsi, this is such disdain, the marketing manager of Pepsi East Africa doesn't know.
Wow.
So to persuade them that there's an audience for what it is that we do, because there was no YouTube to say these are our numbers. There's no Facebook to say this is the number of views and followers that I have. There's no way of saying, there's no way of quantifying this thing unless you're present. And so when a Pepsi or a Coca-Cola or something manager happens to be going to Hard Rock Cafe and looks down and say, who are these young people? Who are these people? Where are they coming from? We don't know about this thing. That's a demographic that they had no idea even existed. And then when it began to become a thing, then even the EABLs wanted to cash in on this. And of course, that's the tail end. By that time, you had Groove Awards, you had whatever, which was 20 years after we began. But we take an audience for granted, that you can actually put together a show and people would come. Now, you have your audience, because you have your own Instagram, you have your own media. You have your Instagram, you have your Facebook, you have your TikTok. This is your own little channel where you've curated your own audience. Some of us have thousands of people on those places who only listen to you. And if you say, I will be in this place on Tuesday, they will come. But at that time, you were completely at the mercy of a radio station or a TV station that says, if we don't play your music and if we don't advertise your thing, you had to argue with executives in the newspapers to say, put our ad here. They say, no, it'll spoil the quality of ours. But you haven't seen the ad. They already assume that, it's a religious event. Right. So we're not going to put it in our paper. As though you're not paying cash for that little quarter page that you're going to going to pay for. So that's the stuff that we take for granted.
Yeah.
To me,
Yeah.
if you ask me the one thing, we take those things for granted. Instagram and social media,
Yeah.
we take it for granted. We
Wow.
take it completely for granted. There was no Instagram.
Yeah.
There was no internet when I was starting.
No, it's true. That's my normal. I don't think that it's a big deal.
What do we do first thing in the morning? Wake up. So there you are. You post your first thing, Happy New Week or whatever, Morning My Loves or whatever it is that you say. And repost whatever, whoever was being done whatever last week or yesterday or whatever.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to create the stuff yourself anymore. You just take the threads that come from you, what happened last weekend, and then you do reposts and rehack and all these crazy things. We take it for granted. That stuff to me is it's like I get how my dad grew up in pre-electricity days, and then when my dad passed on 10 years ago, he's now in Facebook age.
Right.
So he's gone from
Noel,
almost Stone Age to internet, to the information age in one lifetime.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So that's the stuff we take for granted. And I feel understanding. See, this is the problem of not understanding history. It makes you take your present for granted. And when you take your present for granted, your efficacy at even communicating to your audience becomes stilted, it becomes stunted.
No, but it's true. What you said about history, like knowing your history, I think lets us appreciate where we are at now. Speaking of the landscape of where gospel music is in Kenya, I think my lens is just what I grew up on, early 2000s, where the explosion of pop gospel happened and then peaked. And then became the biggest thing, and then like 2015 started
Something just
dipping.
died.
Like what are your thoughts on where it is now? And you can add the convo we're having on worship as well.
Yeah.
You can ramble.
I don't know. I guess living long helps you see things, I think, a little better. I'm so jazzed. I mean, look at how far we've come. That it's actually a force. We could actually design several gospel awards. There was this one, there was that one, there was that one, at least 2 or 3 gospel music awards that had thousands of people on any, what was that thing? You had crossover night, you had crossover, and then you had Kubamba. There's TSO and something totally sold out, and the other one that were happening at the same. These were competing gospel events. That now secular events had no chance, a snowball's chance in hell of surviving. So we've come a long way. I think we can't. I can't look at it and say, "Oh, this is so terrible." It is incredibly wonderful that you now have people who can live off of what it is that they do. There are churches, urban churches in every major city in Kenya, in Kisumu, in every major, in Mombasa, in Nairobi, certainly in Nakuru, who right now they're the music director of their church. That's what they do. That's what they do. To me, that's a huge step. That's a huge step. Hongera. Tumetoka mbali na bado tunaenda mbali. So as far as I'm concerned, hongera. But the flip side of it is when the money came into gospel music, I remember being shocked when I heard Top Star was charging. He stood for 15 minutes and charged 250K. I was like, what? Are you kidding me? 250K. I just tried to do the math. I said, this guy is living. That's so nice. That's a nice living. But then now behind all that, now the stories now followed. Oh, so and so. And then, of course, there was the repercussions. So, and of course, at that time is when now the underground press is now all these, you start to hear all these stories and you're like, oh no, So there's a parallel path that began to take the course, where people now who had no genuine desire for ministry or calling or desire can then show up on a stage and just do your thing. And so then you have this top gospel artist suddenly say, I'm not a gospel artist. In fact, me Vilenico, me gospel artist. And they just suddenly do this, and then they're very good entertainers.
Yeah.
And I said, why didn't you just do that from the beginning? Because that's what you were called to do.
Right.
And I feel that, to drag us all through this whole drama was unnecessary. And then some people, and I see some of them, having these arguments. Oh, I'm better than Diamond. I said, bro, just sit down for a little bit. Get over yourself. And acknowledge the fact that if you're humble, you'll go further. And I feel that the whole idea of becoming a star and having money then became a thing.
The goal.
So listen, I'm not faulting anyone for their hustle. People got to make money.
Yeah.
You got to pay the bills. But how did we get here? We got here because something went wrong with the system. The system. Then you had churches which are churning huge amounts of money but not paying their musicians, and so it was still that same old fight. I can't believe that we're having this fight with pastors, people now who are my peers in their 50s. We can't be having this conversation after all we've been through. So that's been my thing. But unfortunately, we are here. And then something happened with the music, and then suddenly we were in this worship movement, and Kenyans. So I don't know which came first, the hunger to do this worship nights, or when we saw the Tanzanians or whoever else doing it first.
I think it's when we saw the Tanzanians.
Yeah, the Tanzanians or whoever else. So we saw Hillsong, we saw Bethel, we saw Tanzanians, and then we said, let's do this.
Actually, it started from Joyous. We saw Joyous first, and then
Okay. So now granted, but then there's now this move. And so now your studio song doesn't stand a snowball's chance
no chance.
anywhere. So if you didn't do a live recording at XYZ church with the support of that church, which, listen, I have no problem with, but there's a lack of authenticity now because everybody's trying to do the top worship song that will be played the most or sung the most or both.
Yeah.
And you know what that means? It means views, and views means clout. Clout means that you get called again, then you can ask for the cheddar, and then you can do your sponsorships and what have you. And is this what we've become? We've become commercial vehicles. So I'm right back at that place where I'm saying, listen, by the way, just be an accountant during the week and then sing for us. As if you're good at it with us, we can deal with that. Because then what's driving you isn't your hunger for fame or money. What's driving you is a genuine desire to be of service. Now, please don't get me wrong. I have some of my close friends are great musicians, especially in the secular world. And they have a Christian testimony, but they're in the secular world and they're entertainers. I'm cool with that. And I say, do that. I'm saying, do that. But when we come into, and I hate to use this phrase, we come into the temple, that's a sacred space. But when we're coming to the people of God and supposed to be leading them in a space, when I have a polluted motive, then I'm leading people in a way that then pollutes the spirit of what it is that I'm doing. And that does a disservice. It does a disservice to the people who I'm serving, but also to the Lord.
Right.
And I'm all for, hey, Noel, you're gifted as a keyboardist and you have a career path as a jazz musician. Knock that ball out of the park.
Right.
And if God allows you to play in church, then do that. Because I know, I've had conversations with Kirk Whalum and some of these guys who are top musicians. Kirk Whalum was music director, I think, at one point, Whitney Houston's tour. And he played on the #1 top-selling female artist and artist of the time, what's her name? Whitney Houston. I Will Always Love You. He played on that song.
That sax solo,
That sax solo is Kirk Whalum. Reverend.
Yeah, the Reverend. The guy's a rev.
Yeah, but he's a jazz musician. And listen, he's not like a mediocre jazz musician.
Yeah.
This guy is the business. And I say that excellence speaks something in the world. And I feel that sometimes your excellence can do better than your nonsense. And when I say the nonsense is now you're on stage, kila mutu, or kila mutu, and you're pretending. And what it
Yeah.
is it's an act. You're
Right.
doing it. And I feel that there's some people who are called to do the kilamutu in the assembly.
Yeah.
And then there are those who are called to do the kilamutu on the stage.
Yeah.
And I know, people say I'm a worship. I don't know that I'm a worship leader. Again, maybe I'm just branding myself badly now. Usimwite huyo Charlie. Amesema yesi worship leader. But I think as a leader and a thought leader in this, I think we need to, even as pastors, as leaders, we need to pick our people carefully. We need to look more at the heart, do some testing. Because Noel is talented, I'm going to invite him to my church. He's talented. He looks good. He's talented. He can lead people. But not knowing that kumbe Noel is a dragon. And I think that desire for, and this is unfortunately what many pastors were doing when secular artists got born again, then brought them to the stage, and suddenly they were kila mutu, and then he's kila mutuing everybody, and then suddenly he has real issues to deal with character,
Yeah.
and nobody has ever discipled this man. Nobody has ever told him, by the way, vile mebamba wodem si vipoa.
Right.
Unanishoaje? What do you mean? Your pastor does it. Pastor doesn't care. Pastor doesn't tell me anything. So the pastor becomes the gatekeeper who has now allowed this anomaly. And unfortunately, that's what happened. How many young ladies came to me when I was remember I was a pastor for 20 years also. Yeah, that's another side of my life. How many young ladies came to me and said, you see so-and-so famous church musician, so this is what they did to me. And me having to say, and walk up to a pastor and say, by the way, your worship leader guy here is a hyena. Is a hyena.
Hey.
Crocodile. And this over and over again, how many of those pastors said, well, he's helping the worship now here.
Wow.
And I say, so you've just stomped on this girl's life.
Right.
So that kind of a thing, this is what I say now started to happen from after 2010 going forward. And it left a bitter taste. So many millennials, you find many millennials just sitting there saying, we know church guys. They have this bitter taste because this is what was allowed.
Yeah.
And I feel, at one point I felt very responsible. I said, but what can I do? But now the genie's out the box and it's out there. It's a movement that's bigger than you. The reality came to me that I have to do something differently in my approach to. I knew that I'm not in that generation. There's a new generation coming, and I must speak to that generation to be deliberate now at raising leaders for that generation.
That's good. I want to pivot as we wrap, because we've talked through pioneering, and another thing that you've sort of kind of pioneered is your way into media, and a lot of people are not aware. I joked when I started, I said, he's a Stellar Award winner, but that wasn't a joke.
Yeah.
You actually, last year, 2024, you won
Internet Station of the Year
Internet Station of the Year at the Stellars.
at the Stellar Award.
So the Stellars is, tell the people what the Stellars are. It's like the Black Grammys.
Stellar
It's like the
Award.
Black
In
Gospel
fact, I
Grammys.
will tell you, it is the highest award in Black gospel music. It's the highest award you can win in Black gospel music.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
I'm not even exaggerating.
No, that's a fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so God Radio 1, which is the station that I have a show on, we won Internet Station of the Year. And that's beating out the hundreds, possibly thousands of internet stations who entered. And so we're nominated and won the Stellar Award.
Congrats, man.
Yeah.
I
Thank
think
you.
What was the pivot? What made you feel like, you know what, I've done music, you've been a pastor, I want to reach guys through this medium, especially new media, like not even traditional media. Like,
I keep saying that I'm the Forrest Gump. You guys don't believe me. So I've been in radio in 1995. What year was that? 95. In 1995, I got a phone call from Guido Kibukosia. They wanted to pilot something called the Coca-Cola radio show. And Guido said, I think you can do it. And so I got into the studio and I got a radio show called the Coca-Cola radio show in 1995.
Okay.
And so I've been in and out doing radio shows since then. So one day, my record label, the record label executive, a friend we were trying to do things with the record label with Mandate Records, which I remember I talked to you about at that time. Mandate Records CEO calls me and said, Pete, we were just going into COVID. He says, listen, we have a license to do a radio show. We want to do an internet radio show, radio station. All those artists you're talking about from Africa, put them on that show and give me a weekly show and I'll be happy. So I started putting these artists, I put Noel, Nderitu, and others, and all the music that we listen to in Africa, from Diana Hamilton, Patrick Duncan, all these guys from all these different parts of Africa. This incredible sound of the new sound of urban Africa on this station.
Yeah.
And I feel that it's that difference that we're bringing something eclectic to the table that said, man, this is a very different... Because you go to the US, you talk about a black radio station, you hear one, you've heard them all.
Right.
Ours was different. And that's the thing that made us different. So I figure that I wasn't trying, again, to pioneer radio.
Yeah.
I said, this is something I can do. I can do it. Great. So this was a COVID labor. Right. So in the middle of COVID, I'm putting out these shows and what have you. And, it catches the attention of the world.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're standing side by side by some of the most famous people in the world.
Yeah.
Sharing the same stage as Erica Campbell from Mary Mary. Some of these guys are just incredible people already.
Yeah.
But there I was in Las Vegas with all these guys just rubbing shoulders with for the biggest black gospel show, award show.
Yeah.
And having won, you're not just attending.
Right.
You're carrying the heavyweight with you. It's mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling that a Jaluo boy from Musenge, somewhere in Igbo, on a tiny, our village is so small that there's a guy in Runda whose veranda is bigger than our fishing village. And I'm not even exaggerating.
Yeah.
That you walk across Musenge and it's done. You don't even have to try. That's the village I'm from. That I'm now with these who's who in the world. That's something any African would be proud of.
Yeah.
And so I feel that pivot for me was, I was sort of just filling a space, a COVID space that ended up being a thing. And now it's a thing. The Stellar Award winning radio broadcaster, Pete Odera.
Yes, sir.
So this is not just music now, it's broadcasting. For something I never took a broadcasting class in my life.
Yeah.
I never took a broadcasting class, but here you are. And now because of experience, because I was also a radio presenter, pioneering. Let me tell you now a funny story about this whole show. This idea of having the sound of urban African gospel music was not new. This wasn't the first station I pitched this to.
Yeah.
I pitched this to a certain radio station in our city.
Don't mention.
Who said, I remember my manager coming to me and said, Pete, your show is so boring. This is exactly what he said. Your show is so boring. I think I'm going to have to let you go. This same music, I know I've played some of the same music on our radio show, is Stellar Award winning. Sometimes your audience isn't the one who you pitch it to.
Right.
And these are some of the lessons that I learned, that just because the first person told you no, doesn't mean they're the person who you were supposed to go to in the first place. If you keep pitching, if you keep doing this thing, you don't know, you become a world changer. And I think that's my story, that you can become an accidental. Maybe it's not everybody's story.
Yeah.
But the story is to keep doing what you feel that you're called to do, this thing that is resonating in your soul, that you may not have had the training for, or even if you had the training for, that people don't understand you. That may not be your audience. Your audience could be in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Your audience could be in Australia. Your audience, there you are singing in Portuguese, and you wonder, these guys don't understand my music or don't understand what it is that I do. Yeah, they don't. First of all, they don't understand Portuguese. Just go to Angola and Brazil. You never know how you become a huge star.
Right.
I look at Kato Changi, and how incredibly appreciated he is in Brazil.
Yeah.
And Kato who? In Kenya. That is to me the big deal.
Man. That's bittersweet. Like,
Isn't it?
what you're saying is so factual, but and I know it's true, but it still bugs me, man.
It does. I think it's great if you're celebrated at home.
Yeah.
It is a thing that is intrinsically and very definitely Kenyan. Lupita Nyong'o did not win her first big award at home. You know, Wangari Maathai was pariah
Yeah.
in Kenya
Yeah.
before the Nobel guys. So it's not, this is history. What I'm trying to say to you is that that's how we are.
Yeah.
Kenyans, we hate ourselves. We completely hate Kenyan things. We call Kenyan things cheki mchamba, shamba, cheki chalwa
Try nini?
jamana do. Cheki, and we laugh at the things that the world looks at and say, "Oh, wonderful! Look at him, fantastic, lovely." There's a girl who walked up to me and she said, "I want to try for the Mandela program." The Mandela program was this thing that Barack Obama started for future leaders.
Yeah.
And she came to me with this story, saying this and that. I said, "Listen, you see that story of yours about we call it in our language Nyangile, this Koroboi." She's saying that was her story, that she was studying for Koroboi. What she wanted to do was completely change the world and create opportunities for young girls using alternative sources of energy. That's what got her into the program. That's the story I told her. Tell this story. This is the one that will get you in. That's how she met Barack Obama. What I'm trying to say to you is that sometimes we Kenyans are very good at rejecting. How many of these guys in Kericho, there's thousands of these kids who are running, we will not even know their name, but they're going to win the Boston Marathon. And they'll keep coming. And unfortunately, we don't celebrate them here. They become stars out there. That's when we say, "Oh, by the way, that's our guy." That's a self-hatred.
Yeah.
And that's something that our leadership needs to change. Those who are leaders and thought leaders need to change. Let's begin to celebrate Noel while he's with us. Why should the Canadian government give him a Lifetime Achievement Award before we do? Where is Daystar University to give Noel his Lifetime Achievement? We recognize you, Dr. Noel Nderitu. We're giving you an honorary doctorate and this is not fake. This is because of your contribution to music and culture. Where is that? Instead, we give it to shameless politicians. I feel to us, we really, really, really absolutely have to begin here and stop hating ourselves so much.
Yeah.
To begin to look at what we do and say, isn't this amazing? Because we are wired. Our culture is wired to hate what is homegrown. We were taught by successive generations of missionaries and colonials that if your name is Karaoke, Joroge, Otieno, Naafula, in fact, that's a home name. Don't use those names. Call yourself George. George is a far better, more powerful name. How can George be a more powerful name than Nafula? How? Do you tell me where?
Come on, man.
How can Otieno? Otieno it says so much. George, what does that mean to me?
Yeah.
What does that mean to me? George means nothing to me. I'm sorry to anyone who's called
Sorry,
George.
George, no.
I say, Otieno. Otieno is someone, you know what time he was born. You can tell immediately. Anybody can tell from my place where time that guy was born.
Yeah.
When you call that guy, say, we know your ancestor. They know that's our clan name. My middle name, if any other person called Aluga shows up, I know that is my relative because that name is only unique to our clan.
Right.
So to me, I say that's the big deal. That's the big deal. I can tell you my history. My name can tell history of 250 years. But unfortunately, that's lost on us to say, where did you come from? Ocha sini hapa tu Kiambu. So, but how did you come from Kiambu?
Yeah.
What happened? Do you know your grandparents are still alive? Go and ask them. So I say that's what I'm talking about. When the history, when we begin to understand how beautiful we are, that when Europe was still dark and primitive, we had Dongola, we had Alodia, we had Nabotia, which were kingdoms, Christian kingdoms in Africa in 200-300 AD, when these people were still hiding in caves. before they came to steal our land. This is the reality. You had African Christian kingdoms who had culture, who had commerce, who had art. This is the reality of our history. The richest man who ever lived was an African, Mansa Musa. Why don't we search? That is something to be proud of. Let's talk to the generations. When you begin to have that conversation, then you say, hey, Njoroge is a powerful name. It's 800 years old. Track it down, or whatever your name is.
Yeah.
I'm just saying Njoroge for the sake of this
Yeah.
argument. Track down where we came from. It'll give you such pride and such relevance. Then somebody comes and calls you George. You say, hey, boss, let me tell you something. When your people were in darkness, my people had kingdoms. Because that is my reality. My people had kingdoms. You people received Christianity after us.
Right.
That's a fact.
That's
it's a
factually.
historical fact.
Most people think it's the opposite, sadly.
Yeah, they brought us. He said, yeah. So this is my thing. I think we need to retell our story, and when we begin to retell our story, it'll give an identity to this new generation. I say Gen Z are my greatest audience now. To say, listen, Gen Z, let me tell you, Kothbiro, let me tell you why we sang that song. That song was a cultural song that came from this place. Kelurudok Edala, bring the cows back home. What does that mean to you guys who grew up in the city? There was a certain time when it was going to rain, the cattle were brought back into the kraal or whatever you want to call it now, into the dala. And then, there's context for that. That's where this song came from. Ooh, I'm feeling the goosebumps already. I feel the anointment. We have to tell this story. You have to tell the story that goes back and say, wait, this is what Kanye was sampling. Did he even know what he was sampling?
Exactly.
No, Rick Ross didn't know jack. We need to tell him, you have no idea the history of this thing. I know the guy whose uncle wrote this song.
Yeah.
And then Rick Ross can come and we'll tell him, by the way, come and visit me in Yimbo. Yeah, I don't want to meet you in town. Just
Right.
meet me in Yimbo. Tell him, come to my cultural home. Feel the soil
Yeah.
where these songs came from. That's a completely different discussion to now I want to rub shoulders with the most famous. No. You need us. We can tell you who you are.
Exactly.
Far better than you can tell us who we are.
Ugh, man, mic drop. Come on. Listen, I think the last thing I want to do is just to give you your figurative
Thank you.
flowers.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I know sometimes the job can be thankless.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't say that lightly. For someone who I think, I complain about this and that, I can only imagine when there were no inroads made,
Right.
trying to be that accidental pioneer. So on behalf of musicians who are watching this and have no understanding of history, like for them, they're just like, why are you not paying me what I asked? They don't know that people are not even being paid. That the idea of being a musician was
Yes.
you have failed. You're going to play in the bar. Thank you. Thank you for staying the course. The fact that we are here having this convo, I wouldn't have known who you are if you didn't stay the course. And there are so many musicians that we hear of that are somewhere, maybe
Yeah.
in their village. They were just like, that music thing, I tried, but you stayed the course. And
Yeah.
I think it counts for something. It counts for a generation of us doing music, specifically Christian music, or even guys who are not doing Christian music.
Yeah.
But there's like a whole generation of live musicians who are playing regulars at Gecko, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. You were playing regulars in the 90s
Yeah.
at Barclays Plaza.
Yeah.
They don't know that. They just
Yeah.
think this was the idea that
Yeah.
came. So thank you.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
staying
You're welcome.
the course.
You're welcome.
I pray that our work would honor yours as
Wow.
we continue to honor the Lord. That you would one day you'd sit back and say, man, it was worth it. Like it was like legit. Like
It was.
and I hope that joy would
Yeah.
trump all
Yeah.
anything else that is not joy. That
Yeah.
any regrets, anything, whatever. But thank you for coming through to Essentially
Thank you for
Speaking.
having me. Thank you.
Tell
for
the
having
people
me.
what's going on with you now. Tell them about God Radio. Tell them about
Okay.
any other projects you're doing.
So the new music project is called The Reconstruction of Pete Odera, and it's out. The first couple of songs are out on YouTube, and you can find me on YouTube. Of course, now I'd have to get into my fight with Spotify,
Yeah.
because I have a philosophical fight with Spotify, but that's another story
You
for
and
another
Taylor
day.
Swift, yeah.
God Radio 1, Pick of God Radio. We have an app. You can download it from the App
Play
Store or Google Play, whatever, wherever you get your apps. And TuneIn, it's great music. So that's the app. My show is on once a week, every Sunday. East Africa is 9 a.m. 9 a.m. East African time. It can be 11 p.m. or 7 a.m. if you're in New York, and then just figure out your time.
Yeah.
9 a.m. is, depending on time of the year, either 6 or 7 a.m. GMT. So the show is called Good Morning Africa. I'm very proud of that show. It has pioneered some of the now exploding. Njoki Munyi, we played her first on Good Morning. We can't find her now. She's in the stratosphere. Noel Nderitu, we interviewed you first. The reality is, it's a great show. If you want to Pan-African music magazine that highlights what's going on right now. So that's the space. Otherwise, I'm Dr. Pete Odera on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram. Yes, I am on TikTok, but I'm there, so you can find me there. And I try and keep my socials interesting.
Okay, man. Thank you so much for
You're welcome.
gracing us.
You're welcome.
And we'll be keeping tabs if you are a citizen of Essentially Speaking.
Thank you for doing Essentially Speaking, by the way. I think this is important.
Yeah?
Yeah. I have a strategy manager who says to me, I have these arguments because I wasn't completely sold on podcasts at the beginning. So it's slowly growing on me. So please consider me a recent convert of Essentially Speaking.
So hopefully we might see Peter Odera pod at some point.
I've tried to put something out, but it's just not been consistent enough. So I for sure, that's a space that we need to.
I think it will help with our history learning.
Yeah. Thank you again for having me. I really appreciate what you're doing.
All right, I'll see you on the next one. Tell me who you want to see, past, present, legend, upcoming. Comment below. Peace.
Skis are flown, a conversation, essentially speaking.